If you were here last week, we engaged a conversation Jesus has with a guy named Nicodemus, and it houses that very famous verse, right? John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he sent his one and only son. He has this conversation with Nicodemus, and it's this powerful conversation. And what the conversations do, what the moments in John do, is they reveal something about Jesus. They reveal something about who he is, and not to just these people way back then, but who he is today. And we're going to jump into another one of those stories today. We're going to jump into another encounter Jesus has with a person. It's in John chapter 8. John chapter 8. I want to encourage you to turn there, maybe in a physical Bible or on a phone. As you do, I want to give you a little bit of context on this passage we'll engage today. If you have a physical Bible or maybe even in an app type format, you'll probably see a little footnote around this passage. And that footnote is something along the lines of this. This account was not in the most early manuscripts of the Gospel of John, something like that. And what that means is this. In John's first account, his first compilation of the life and ministry of Jesus and the teachings and the events surrounding it, this account was not in there. It's very likely, though, that this story, one, that it did happen, but more than that it was passed down through the spoken word for years and years and years. And when what comes to us as our Bible was formed several hundred years later after the time of Jesus, this story finds its way into the Gospel of John. So when you see that note about it wasn't in the earliest manuscripts, that wasn't someone went rogue 50 years ago and just wrote a story. That was several thousand years of church history in the making, and this account added to John's Gospel. And like you'll see, this perfectly aligns with the theme of John, which is to help you, to help me believe that Jesus is who he says he is. Okay, John chapter 8, verse 2, it says this. At dawn, Jesus appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" The teachers of the law bring in this moment, and Jesus is confronted with this question. He's confronted with this situation. And we actually know the motive of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. It wasn't a really pure motive. We see this in verse 6. It says this, they were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. And really what's happening here, if Jesus were to consent and say, hey, let's go on and do that, let's follow the Mosaic law that they had at that point, the religious law that they were operating from, if he would have done that, he would have violated the Roman law, the judicial law of the land. If he doesn't do that, he appears to be violating the religious law, the Mosaic law. So you can see Jesus is in a little bit of a pickle, and that's what their intent is. They're trying to trap him. They're trying to say, look, see, this guy's a counterfeit. Look, he's not really who he says he is. He's not really from God. Look what he did. And look how Jesus responds. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to walk away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." They come to Jesus with this problem, with this situation. And what the problem is, what the situation is not this question. They're not wondering this, hey, Jesus, did she do something wrong? That's not the question. The question is not, hey, Jesus, we caught this woman in this situation, which is like, if you rewind, you're like, how did you catch someone in that situation? Chances are you were probably looking, okay? You're probably trying to trap. You're probably trying to catch people, and in my opinion, that's just a little creepy. But anyway, He's in this situation, and the question is not, Jesus, are you defining what's happening here as wrong? The question is, we all know it's wrong. Jesus, how do you respond to it? Jesus, how do you respond when someone sins? How do you respond when someone misses the mark? How do you respond to this scenario with this woman? How do you respond? And I want us to see and to soak in and to see and experience Jesus' response to what he really does in this scenario, because it's so powerful. And to do that, I want us to do our best to enter into the moment. Okay, like if we can not read it like a bunch of facts on a page, but I want us to enter in, like do your best to put yourself there that day. Just like any story, there's a setting, right? It's dawn where it's cool outside, a little bit like the Michigan morning we were blessed with today, right? It's cool outside. They're at the temple. They're at this hub of social life and religious life in Jerusalem. And there's these four characters we see in this story, in this moment. Number one, there's the crowd. There's the crowd. The crowd gathered around Jesus. They're there to hear this teacher. They're here to hear this rabbi teach them. Number two is Jesus. Jesus is there, right? He's the guy in the hot seat. He's the guy with the spotlight that's now on him. Now, Jesus, what do you say? This is Jesus. There's the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. And then there is this woman who in this moment is ashamed, humiliated, put on the spot, the center of attention, and not in a good way. Now, when we entered into the story, you probably chose one of those characters to enter in as, and I'm assuming you entered in as a member of the crowd. Like, all right, we're gonna be there that day. Let's go. Let's be a fly on the wall. Maybe you're like on the top corner of the temple, just kind of like spying down. Maybe you're like Zacchaeus was, the wee little man. You found a tree to perch at, and you're watching this scenario. Because the crowd probably makes sense for you and I to jump in, right? We probably shouldn't assume that we're Jesus. That seems a little presumptuous. We probably shouldn't assume we're the Pharisees, because they're like kind of the bad guys. Like, I never put someone on the spot like that. Never done that. We're probably not the woman, though maybe I've made some mistakes. I haven't faced death in public ridicule like she did. I haven't been in her shoes. I can't really relate. So we entered as the crowd. But we have this moment in John's gospel given to us not to just be a fly on the wall, not to just say, oh, Jesus, we're so glad you spared this woman's life. We're so glad you did some cool things. We're in this moment to see and experience who Jesus is directly to us. His nature and his qualities, and how he doesn't just address people's one day in history, but how he addresses us today. So I want us to play back the story. I want to walk back through Jesus' response, and I want you to do your best to put yourself in the shoes of the woman. The woman. Let's step into her shoes. Not just a member of the crowd, not just a bystander, but let's step into the shoes of a woman. And maybe you haven't done what she specifically did. Maybe you haven't been in that kind of a heated scenario before. Maybe you haven't had the stakes as high as she seems to have them in this moment. But in one way or another, we have all stood where she stood. We have all come to moments of our life where the choices we've made, choices we didn't make, the things we said, the things we didn't say, the decisions we opted into, they have backed us into a corner. The heat is on, the pressure is on, and we're asking ourselves questions like, what now? And what next? And can I move forward from this? Maybe you're in that moment today. Maybe it feels like the situations you put yourself in, the decisions you made, they have backed you into that corner, and you wonder, what is the response of, yes, other people, but certainly, what is the response of Jesus. Put yourself in her shoes. And again, this story answers the question not, did she do something wrong? Did she miss the mark? It is, what does Jesus do when she and when we are in that place? And I want you to see Jesus' response. It's so powerful. Look how he responds. Verse 16, but Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. What is he writing? No one knows. We could spend all of today and this week trying to assume and pontificate and brainstorm what was he writing in the sand. But the fact is not what was he writing, but the fact that he did write. And to write, the scripture says, he stoops down. He lowers himself, which means this. Maybe the woman at this moment is crouched down in shame. Maybe she's literally bracing herself for stones in that moment. Maybe she's crouched down. And Jesus, when he stoops down to write, it's not so much about what he wrote, but the fact that he stooped down too. He gets on her level. Stoops down. Or maybe she's remaining standing. Maybe she's looking around and she's wondering, man, is anyone going to show me some grace? Is anyone going to empathize with me in this moment? Is anyone going to maybe give me a second chance? And she's standing up, and Jesus in that moment, when he lowers himself, he actually lowers himself beneath her level. He lowers himself down, and he writes on the ground. And think about that, like the ancient teachers would use the sand as a little bit of like a whiteboard, or anyone remember a chalkboard? Does anyone? You ever? Okay, a couple of you. Like an ancient whiteboard, Jesus starts to write. He goes into teaching mode. He pauses the moment. He crouches down and he starts to write. And I love the posture of Jesus in this moment because it shows us that he met her and Jesus meets us. Jesus meets us. When we're in that place, Jesus meets us. When we're back against the wall, wondering, can I recover? Can I move forward? Is there anything past us? Jesus meets us in that moment. And look what he does. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. And when he does that, yes, he's advocating for her. He's speaking on her behalf. But I love what Jesus does in this moment because he meets her, but then he does something in response to what she's done. And Jesus meets her, but Jesus doesn't deny her sin. And he doesn't deny our sin. Notice, he says, let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone. So Jesus is saying, hey, I'm meeting you. I'm pausing this moment. I'm at your level, and I'm not at your level because I want to deny what you did. Jesus doesn't deny the sin. He's saying, I see the fact that she's messed up. I'm aware of that truth. He brings reality in, but he has a different response to that reality than we often have. And he has a different response to that reality than we often expect him to have with us. He says, let any of you who is without sin. Then again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you. And Jesus meets her and he meets us. He doesn't deny the sin, and he also does not condemn us. Jesus doesn't condemn us. Is she guilty? Yes. Is she condemned? No. To condemn means to consider unfit for use. I don't know if you ever like a piece of equipment or maybe a tool one time that you said like, man, I've got the mileage out of it. Maybe it's a car, right? That's not safe to use anymore. That's the picture of condemn. To consider unfit, permanently disqualified. And Jesus says, you've missed the mark, but I don't condemn you. I don't set you aside. Is she guilty? Yes, she's missed it. Is she condemned? No. then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. Jesus calls her and he calls us to something new. Something new. How does Jesus respond when we're in that place? When we know we've missed it, when probably everyone around us knows we missed it too, when the back's against the wall, when the pressure is on, he meets us. He doesn't deny the sin. He doesn't condemn. He calls to something new. And to sum it up really in this moment, what Jesus is offering her, what he offers us is grace and truth. Grace and truth. Grace, kindness, favor. He's with her. He meets her. There's an understanding, but he also extends truth. What is right, clear. He holds a standard. Grace is Jesus meeting her. Truth is not denying the sin. Grace is, I don't condemn you. I don't permanently push you out. I don't permanently disqualify you. I don't say you're unfit for any future use. I don't condemn you, but I'm also calling you to something new. In this moment, Jesus offers her grace and truth. See, before this woman is caught in this act, before she's caught by the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, she's caught by something deeper. She's caught by something else. And we don't know exactly what leads her to this moment. We don't know exactly what leads her to this reality. Is it a life of seeking self-worth? Is it a life of seeking pleasure? Is it a life of running from pain? Is it a life of seeking acceptance? We don't know. But something has a hold of her. Something has caught her. And Jesus in this moment extends what she needs. And what she needs is grace and truth. She doesn't just need someone to say, oh, that's okay. I condone that. That's fine. And she doesn't just need a heavy hand and a heavy hammer. She needs both in this moment. And Jesus meets her and he says, hey, you missed the mark, but that doesn't have to be the last word. Hey, you're outside of what I've created you and invited you to do. Why don't you step into something new? This is grace and truth in this moment. And this is not just one moment for Jesus. This is who Jesus is. 2 times in John chapter 1, he describes this Jesus as this way. He's full of grace and truth. Full, like filled up to the brim. Not 50-50 grace and truth, not depends on the day, depends on if it's a weekend, you might get one or the other, depends on how Jesus is feeling. He's not 70% grace and 30% truth. He is 100% grace and 100% truth. Full of grace and truth. How does that work? I don't know. He's God. Perfectly grace, perfectly truth. What I also love about this story is this woman gets to experience grace and truth. She gets to encounter grace and truth through this moment with Jesus, but she's not the only person who needs that encounter. She's not the only person in this moment, in this story that we've stepped into, that needs the grace and truth of Jesus. And I want to encourage you, we've gone from the crowd to the woman. Now I want to encourage you to put yourselves in the shoes, not of the woman, but of the Pharisees. And if you say, wait a moment, I'm not a Pharisee. I'm not like a religious policeman dragging people out in public. I'm not a stoner, like different stoner, physical stones. Like, I don't throw stones at people. I haven't tried to publicly humiliate people like the Pharisees had. I'm not a Pharisee. And we may not drag people out in public and throw stones or want to throw stones at them, but I don't know about you, but I've thrown sarcastic comments about the actions or intentions of people. I've thrown judgment when someone else's walk in life or walk with Jesus doesn't look the way I think it should look. I've thrown avoidance when someone is not part of my plan, part of my agenda, part of my schedule. I've thrown assumptions about people and groups, most of which I barely know. I haven't just been in the shoes of the woman, I've been in the shoes of a Pharisee. And maybe I'm the only one. But we can be the woman, and if we're not careful, we can also be the Pharisees. And one of the ways Jesus shows them grace and truth in this moment, he shows the Pharisees grace and truth, is they get to experience this moment with the woman, right? Like you got to wonder like what all is happening here, and they're silent for what we know of. Jesus has this moment with the woman, but then he turns to them and addresses them. He doesn't just engage the woman, he engages the Pharisees too. Verse 7, it says, he straightened up and said to them. Now he's not speaking about the woman, he's speaking to them. Let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Again, he stooped down and wrote on the dirt. At this, those who heard, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, began to go away one at a time until only Jesus was left. What Jesus does in this moment is he extends them grace and truth. He extends them reality. Not judgment, not condemnation, but reality. And we can be Pharisees. We can slip into the mindset of these Pharisees when we do a couple of things. One of those is when we forget our own brokenness. That's what's so powerful about this moment. You realize they like don't say anything to Jesus, but they don't say anything against Jesus. They're like called out. We're going to move on. We're walking away. When we forget our brokenness and focus on the brokenness of others, when we lose sight of what Jesus has done in us, when we adopt a mindset of, well, I'm not quite who I was, I'm not all I can be, I'm not all Jesus has called me to be, but I'm not as bad, I'm not as broken as I once was. We can step into the shoes of a Pharisee, and in this moment, the grace and truth of Jesus gets them back in touch with their own humanity. It says, hey, if any of you is perfect, if any of you is without sin, you go ahead and judge her. Go ahead and condemn her. Go ahead and you have the final word. And they walk away one by one. Jesus gets them in touch with their humanity and their brokenness and their own story. And he does it by holding up this mirror of grace and truth. Grace and truth. He doesn't yell at them, rebuke them, or condemn them. He offers them grace and truth. Both the woman and the Pharisees get a chance to receive the grace and truth of Jesus. And how do we not just look at this story as a what happened one day? How do we step into and experience it? We do the same thing. We receive grace and truth. Both fully from Jesus. If we're in that moment that we've been backed up against the wall by our own decisions, by our own brokenness, by our own will in sin, we receive the grace and truth of Jesus. Whether we feel like we're in the woman's shoes or the Pharisee's shoes, Jesus offers. He said, this is a part of receiving who I am. This is a part of walking with me, is to receive grace and truth today. Would you receive that? Would you receive the grace and truth of Jesus? You don't have to earn it. You don't have to try and achieve it and get it. You can receive it. Say, Jesus, that's what I need. Need your grace. Need your grace in this area. Need your grace for that decision. Need your grace for this season. And Jesus, I need your truth to show me a new way, to call me to a new way, to call me to something new. I need your grace and your truth. Now, I want you to put yourself in one more character's shoes. One more set of shoes to step in, and that's the shoes of Jesus. Shoes of Jesus. Remember, this story is not to just read what happened then and who Jesus was then and what he did then, but to help us experience who he is now. And one of the realities of who Jesus is now is he calls us to not just follow him, but to actually be like him. To demonstrate and not just receive his qualities, but to take on his qualities and to live as he lived. One of the ways Jesus said this, like, hey, freely you have received, now freely give. Other times he worked in the lives of other people, and Jesus turned around at those individuals and says, now you go and do likewise. He looked at his followers. We'll walk with this in a couple weeks in the book of John. It says, hey, as the Father sent me, I am sending you. To not just be a receiver, but a giver. To not just be a benefiter, but to be a distributor of who he is and what he does. And we have this story to experience that reality too, because for many in our lives, before they meet Jesus, they meet us. Before they meet Jesus, they meet us. Before they get to know him, they get to know you. And so Jesus says, I don't want you just to soak this in. I want you to pour this out, to demonstrate it. And part of our prayer in those relationships, part of our prayer in those spaces is, Jesus, would you help me live like you lived? Help me see like you see. Help me walk like you did. Help me to stoop down to. Help me not to condemn. Help me to offer grace and truth. Help me to not just receive grace and truth. Help me to extend grace and truth. If you called me to be like you are in the world, to be your hands and feet, to be an extension of you, would you help me to extend grace and truth to the people it's easy to do that to the people it's hard to do that to the women and to the Pharisees and to the crowd and everyone in between. Help me receive it and receive it so much that I could extend it, that I could give it. And that's often the hard part. The hard part is not receiving the grace of Jesus. The hard part is not Jesus forgiving me. The hard part is not Jesus working in my life and blessing my life. The hard part is, how do I be that for other people? How do I be a channel of that? To receive grace and truth, but to extend grace and truth. Much of Jesus' journey was around the city of Jerusalem, but he really traveled throughout the broader nation of Israel at the time. And north of Jerusalem, in the north part of Israel, is a sea called the Sea of Galilee. And many times if you read the Gospels, if you read the life and the ministry of Jesus, you'll know that the Sea of Galilee, a lot of things happen here. This is where Jesus walks on the water. This is where he calms the storm. This is where he calls some of his disciples, the Sea of Galilee. And the Sea of Galilee is up in the northern region. It's a very vibrant body of water. There's lots of fish. There's lots of vegetation, lots of things happening here. It was a good place to be. Another body of water south of Jerusalem is what is called the Dead Sea, and it's called the Dead Sea for reasons you can probably imagine. There's not much going on there. There's not much living there. And what strikes me about both of these bodies of water, both of these seas, is that they're both connected to what's called the Jordan River. If you read the story of the scriptures, you probably interact with the Jordan River a little bit. And the Jordan River flows north to south, and it starts north of the Sea of Galilee. It flows into the Sea of Galilee and flows south into the Dead Sea. And when it reaches the Dead Sea, the Jordan River stops. And the Dead Sea has no outlets. There's plenty of water going in, and there's none going out. And what happens is, as water evaporates from the hot sun, it leaves minerals and salt especially, and there's so much salt content. There's so many minerals in the water that virtually nothing can grow and let alone survive. So it's called the Dead Sea. Maybe you've seen people doing the float, right? The saltwater float and things like that in the Dead Sea. Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, same input. The Sea of Galilee has output. There's movement out of it. There's outflow. The Dead Sea, there's none. It's a little bit what it can be like in our lives. When we say, I want to receive, I want to benefit, I want to receive and get and soak in, but I don't want to pour out. I don't want to distribute. I don't want to give. And part of the truth and the power of grace and truth is not just how do I soak it in, how do I step in the shoes of the woman or the Pharisees or of the crowd, but how do I step into the shoes of Jesus? And how does he fill me with his grace and truth? How do I open myself to his grace and truth to receive, but then also to extend it? To receive the grace and truth of Jesus. Not just all grace, not just all truth, but to receive and then extend both. And how do we do it? We follow the model of Jesus. We meet people. We don't deny sin. We don't deny wrong when it's there. But we don't condemn. We don't permanently disqualify. We don't permanently consider unfit for use. And we do our best to show and call ourselves and other people to something new. Grace and truth. To meet people, to stoop down, to see people, to get to know people. To not deny sin when it's there, not deny brokenness, injustice, whatever it may be. To not condemn. Billy Graham said it's Jesus' job to save, it's the Holy Spirit's job to convict, and it's my job to love. Dang it, Billy. Don't condemn. And then call them to something new. Got to have a conversation with the guy I met through playing basketball, and I was specifically about marriage, and he's not married, and I hope one day he gets to be married, and had a very just clear conversation about how I've come to understand marriage and how I believe Jesus calls us to live in marriage. And let me tell you this, our philosophies of marriage at this point are way different ends of the spectrum. But we sat and had lunch and talked about it. And I did my best to, hey, I want to just call you to something different. I just want to invite you. You've been trying that way. What if you tried this way? What if you tried the Jesus way? In that moment, like, I've received grace and truth. I've needed the grace and truth of Jesus. I need to receive that. Also a moment to say, I can be Jesus to him. I can extend it in this moment. And I didn't have a Bible and I didn't have a podium, but I had a relationship and a moment and a conversation. We all have those moments too, to say, Jesus, I want to be a receiver and a giver of your grace and truth. And imagine if a couple hundred people who call Journey home were living that way. We're living in these kinds of moments. We're stepping not in just the shoes of the woman or of the crowd or of the Pharisees, but stepping in the shoes of Jesus too. So Jesus, I want to receive it and I want to extend it, not perfectly, but intentionally. Imagine your home, your community, your workplace, our nation, our world. Receive it, extend it. So I want to just give you a little bit of time to process those realities today. And to do it, I want to just leave you with this one question. To do it, middle of all, I want to hand it back to your location as you process. And then here in the room and online, this one question: what is the Spirit saying to you? What is the Spirit saying to you? He's already spoken through his word. He's given us this moment in the life of Jesus. Jesus in this moment is full of the Holy Spirit. He's full of the Spirit of grace and truth. Today, the Spirit of God speaks to us, whispers to us, convicts, teaches, guides us. And so I want to give you a minute or two just to sit with that question. Maybe you personalize it. Spirit, what are you saying to me? As I consider the invitation to receive grace and truth and to extend it by his power. Sit with that question for a moment, then we'll pray together.